on today's StoryBeat.
Don't just sit down and write a book. It's just not going to work. The best thing to do is take the smallest steps and write a little scene about something. You don't have to have the whole book. You don't have to even know what it's about. Just the way I did it. You just create a character and just write scenes with this character, whether it shows up in the book or not, because it will get your creativity going.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Leslie A. Rasmussen, wrote TV comedies for folks like Gerald McRaney, Burt Reynolds, Roseanne Barr, Norm McDonald, and Drew Carey, while working on popular sitcoms such as Major Dad, Roseanne, Alf, The Wild Thornberrys, Sweet Valley High, Evening Shade, Norm, and The Good Life. After leaving the TV industry to raise her boys, Leslie obtained a master's degree in nutrition and ran her own business for 10 years. She's been published over 20 times in the Huffington Post and speaks on panels discussing female empowerment. Leslie's debut novel, After Happily Ever After, has won over 15 awards, and her second novel, The Stories We Cannot Tell, has won 11 awards. Leslie's latest novel, When People Leave, was released in May 2025. I've read When People Leave and can tell you it's a highly engaging, superbly crafted tale about death, grief, and the unraveling of a family mystery that involves three sisters going on the road together, all told with a light touch and great heart. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a great honor for me to welcome the outstanding award-winning writer, Leslie Rasmussen, to StoryBeat today. Leslie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So how old were you going back in time when you first started thinking about words and writing and the entertainment industry? When did you start thinking about all this?
From the time I was very young, living in Los Angeles, I loved the entertainment industry. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know what I wanted to do in it. So I started out acting for a little while, and then I went to college. And when I graduated, I got a job at what was MTM Productions, Mary Tyler Moore. I was an intern there. Then they hired me. I worked all over the studio before I got a job as an assistant on Hill Street Blues. And while I was there, I thought, oh, now I'm going to be a line producer. And there weren't that many women line producers. And there were some great men there that took me around and let me learn all kinds of things. And during that time, I was also the second Newhart show, the one in the inn.
Called Newhart.
Newhart, right, exactly, was being shot on the lot. And I had a lot of friends there. So I'd go hang out. And I found that comedy writers were just fun to be around. I loved the whole thing. It just made me glow. So I started writing scripts. At my job at Hill Street Blues, I was writing sitcoms during all the time I had off.
Okay, so you didn't start writing till a little bit later in life. It wasn't like you were writing when you were 5 years old.
Yes and no. I wasn't. I kept a journal. I wrote a lot of stories, but I wasn't thinking about it as a job at all. I used to love writing just sarcastic, humorous letters to my parents when I was away or whatever. So I wrote all the time. I just didn't think of it as a career.
Well, so, you alluded to comedy writers and how fun they are. They're also usually a pretty crazy bunch at the same time. And I think that's what makes them fun, is they don't think like everybody else thinks.
That's really true. And when you're in the room, stuff that's said is just, it would never go in a script. It's so far off the wall, but that's what makes it fun.
Well, and when you get a group of, frequently it was men in the old days. Of course, there are a lot more women now, but you'd get a group of people in a room together for 10 or 12 hours a day. It's going to get a little nutty after a while.
It does. And I will say there were not a lot of women, like you said, but the women were more competitive than the men were.
Good. They had to be. And that's been true in so many different kinds of professions, but particularly in the writing business in Hollywood, women have had to be super aggressive to get anywhere.
Exactly.
The truth is the men have to be aggressive too, but the women have to be extra aggressive.
Yeah. Now there's way more women running studios and networks. And so it's a lot different than it was. But at the time, yeah, I mean, I was meeting with agents at one point, and I went into an agency, and the agent said to me, I really like your writing, but I have too many people like you in my stable.
Too many people like you? What does that mean?
I just walked out after a few minutes because I was like, what does that mean and how insulting? And I think he just meant I have too many women comedy writers and, so I don't need another one. I don't know why he met with me in the first place.
Well, that's always been the puzzle for me about Hollywood. As you know, as we've chatted a little bit ahead of the show, I also was out there for a long time, and I've never quite understood some of the attitudinal things that go on in Hollywood, especially with the representatives in the world, because some of them treat their clients like some form of product or cattle. It's not like they're dealing with humans. They're dealing with some kind of object.
Which is mostly because I think agents the writer's the creative part and the agent is the business part. And they look at you like you are a product and they just have to send you out and try to get you a job. So you really are a product to them. And they have a certain amount of products and they try to get everybody jobs.
And really quite too frequently, the artists, the writers and the producers and the directors, they don't understand the business end of the business before they get in it. That's not what they're focused on. And so they're at the mercy of those people who are the business heads.
Exactly. And you learn a lot over the years, though.
So as a kid, what were you watching? Were you watching comedies as a kid? Were you a funny kid?
I don't consider myself funny except on paper. I'm not somebody who's like really super outgoing and just like can off the cuff say whatever.
Right.
That's just not who I am.
Right.
I can be quick. My father was very quick and had a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one in the family that always got his jokes. So he loved to kind of like whisper things to me, and it was fun. But that's just not who I really am.
So you were his great audience.
Oh yeah, I was his great audience for sure.
It's always, in my life, I've always had people that I've glommed onto who were my great audience. So I understand that feeling, because if you're telling your best, what you think are your best, cleverest, wittiest things to someone and they're not getting it and they're not laughing, you're not going to hang around them very long.
Exactly. And my father loved my humor too. So it was really fun.
So at what point, as you were writing scripts on Hill Street Blues that were comedy scripts, not dramas, at what point did you think to yourself, I think I am good enough to be produced?
Honestly, I thought it pretty quick, which is just funny because I'm very hard on myself. But I wrote so many spec scripts. I mean, I wrote Seinfeld and Golden Girls and, Newhart. I wrote a ton of spec scripts. And the more I wrote, the easier it got for me. And I also, when I was a kid, I loved TV and I loved like the Mary Tyler Moore Show and all those shows. And at the time, we didn't have video, VCRs and all that kind of stuff.
Right,
so
right.
I would audio tape them and I would listen to them over and over and over again, just for fun, not thinking about that. So later when I decided to go into TV, I did that. I taped all these shows and I just kept listening to the rhythms and how it worked. And I think that really helped me learn how to write screenplays.
What a great lesson for those that are listening to this show. If you want to really learn how to get the rhythm and timing of comedy, it's often better to listen to it, unless it's a slapstick movie or TV show. But if it's something that's verbal, a play or whatever, listening to it but not watching it can be very, very instructive as to how to write the thing. That's, it's hard enough to do. Do you prefer writing prose, which you've gotten into mostly over the last few years, as opposed to writing screenplays? Or do you wish you were still writing screenplays?
I wanted to go back into screenplays, but it just was not going to be possible. I'd been out for too many years and, even getting an agent at that point, and half the people I knew were out of the business by that point, by the time I would have gone back. But I love writing dialogue. So you read my book. It's a lot of dialogue. The prose part is the hard part for me because when you're on TV, you're really not writing that. That's the director or the prop master or whatever. And so I had to teach myself how to do that. And when I wrote one of the Wild Thornberrys, which was completely different than anything I'd ever written.
Yes, because it's animation.
They also gave me notes to teach me how to write the animation, because you're telling the characters what to do and you're describing scenes. So I think that helped a little bit.
To be clear for the listeners, when you write a screenplay, you're not really filling in all of the blanks. You're sort of indicating a little bit what happens, and then it's left up to the craftspeople, the director of photography, the director, the art director, the makeup people, the costume people. It's up to them to fill in those blanks. But what you're saying, which is true, as a novelist or a prose writer, you have to provide all that, which is interesting because you got that lesson as you were talking about the Wild Thornberrys. As you know, I've written close to 90 cartoons, and you are actually writing a storyboard as opposed to not filling in the blanks. You have to fill in the blank. As a prose writer, it is a little more daunting, I think, to be a writer, but I think it's easier in a way because you don't have to be as succinct.
That's true. And writing books, I mean, I read a ton of books. And the one thing that people have said about my books in reviews and things like that is that they love the dialogue, because it got them to know the characters really well, which is what you have in television, is you get to know, I mean, they have actors, so you kind of do that, but dialogue helps you really get to know people.
And you clearly, in the book, you clearly write funny dialogue. It's funny.
That's what's fun for me.
And so that takes you back to writing screenplays, and yet without having to write a screenplay.
Exactly. I can still, use that.
And beautifully, you don't have to go through the process that a screenwriter goes through of trying to sell it and pitch it to everybody and wait for people to give you notes and wait for them to rip it apart and rewrite it and all those things that happen on a TV show, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I do give it to a professional editor, to let them give me whatever notes they give me. But yes, that's probably true. I mean, I've published in so many different ways, from hybrid to traditional to self-publishing. And so you do get a different thing from each person that you publish with.
And you would, if you gave your book to 20 editors, you'd get 20 different edits.
Yes. And that's why so a lot of people will give it to beta readers and give a ton. With my first book, I gave it to two people that I trusted the most. One was an author and one was an executive at a company. And I knew that she read tons and tons of scripts, so I knew she knew how story worked. So I gave it to just them. But since my first book, I don't do that anymore. I just give it to professional editors, just because you can get too many people telling you one thing and then somebody else contradicts that, and then you're all confused.
That's absolutely true. So you don't work in a writer's group or anything like that?
I don't. I don't usually read my stuff to anybody except for myself. And my husband will read it most of the time too. And he's really good at grammar and editing like that, like cutting things. He's really good at cutting, and where he'll say, you don't need this, or you said this too many times, or whatever. So I'll give it to him first, and then I'll go to a professional editor.
Well, we should say that your husband is a professional writer as well.
Yes, he's an executive producer, writer.
Yeah, so he understands how to write and he understands story, and that would be very helpful to get his feedback.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little bit of a quandary if it's your spouse, because you're hopeful that they give you positive and decent criticism and they're not holding back on it because they're your spouse.
He doesn't. I mean, he's really good. He likes my writing, he's seen it for many, many years, but he also is really good about saying, if I say, but I like that part, he'll say, well, you can keep it, but I'm just telling you why it doesn't work. I'll be like, okay, it's my choice, but he's usually right.
Oh, so. I love that line. Keep it if you want to. but okay, I'll let you do it. It's like that kind of thing. All right. So let's talk about when people leave. Tell the listeners what People Leave is all about. I alluded to a little bit, but tell us more.
So it's about three sisters who find out that their single mother took her own life. And it's their journey to find out why she would do that, because as far as they know, she's been doing great and she's happy, and they have no clue. So they go on this journey, and while they're on this journey, they find out a lot of secrets that they had no idea, and how these secrets affected them because they were very, very young when these secrets started. And so it just tells them how they made decisions in their lives that they probably would have made different decisions if they knew these secrets.
Mm-hmm. What led you to write this? How did this come about?
So I had been seeing articles about teenagers who went off to college and they kept telling their parents they were happy and doing great. And then their parents found out that they killed themselves.
Ooh.
And I thought, I don't want to write about a teenager doing that because it's so horrible. But I thought that's really interesting because then the parents had to go to the school and all their friends and try to figure out piece the whole thing together. So I thought that. And then we have a few friends who are comedy writers who took their own life. And we even saw one of them not much before. And he was his usual boisterous, wonderful self. And nobody in the outside world knew what was going on with these people. So I just thought that was like sort of interesting, the idea behind it. So then I wanted to write something with three sisters because I have two. And the sisters in this book are very, very different on purpose from all of us. But I always wanted to write a book about sisters. So that's kind of how that started.
And to make it all together, it's also this mystery. You're solving a mystery throughout the whole book.
Yes, which I'd never really done before. And that sort of just kind of happened as I went along because I didn't really know. I had an outline, but I didn't really know all the little breadcrumbs that were going to happen. I had to keep going back and place all the breadcrumbs once I figured out the end of the book.
Well, are you a plotter or do you tend to just go by the seat of your pants? I
do a little of both. I do plot it. I do always have an outline, but a lot of times the outline will change. And as I'm writing it, if I'm in a chapter and the chapter is changing something in the character, something comes to me, then the outline's going to change a little bit.
So other than the fact that it's three sisters and you have two sisters, so there are three of you, this is not a personal book. This is not based on your life.
There's absolutely nothing based on my life.
It's total fiction.
It's total fiction.
So, all right. So the subject matter, of course, underneath is fairly dark. I mean, it's about trying to figure out why mom killed herself. Did that make it in any way psychologically challenging for you to write about?
Not really, because my father passed away, not from suicide, but my father passed away from medical stuff. Now it's almost 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when he did, my whole family, we were all devastated. I was very close to my father. All of us were. And we all went to my mother's. And when we were there, we all sat down and we were crying, but we were laughing because my dad was so funny. So we were all talking about all these things. And I realized, yes, the suicide starts the book, but it's not really about suicide and it's not really about death. It's really about these sisters who come together and have their own issues with each other and then are figuring out this mystery. So it's really not a depressing book. And I could use a lot of humor in it.
Yeah, it's definitely not a depressing book, but the backdrop is dark. It's not it's not about going to the circus and having a lovely day at the park. So tell us about Carla, the mom. What is it about her that causes her, and don't give anything away, obviously, but what causes her to develop secrets? Why does she feel the need not to tell her daughters?
She had a very difficult childhood. And as she went on and she got married, there were things that happened in her marriage and she had to leave. And she basically doesn't ever want anybody to know where she is. And she doesn't want the kids to know anything about her previous life. So she's told them certain things that are not true.
Mm-hmm. And that then becomes the source of more and more of the unraveling mystery. And then so you've got the three daughters, Morgan, Charlie, and Abby, and they are very different, as you say. How do you develop characters? How did you develop these three? Since they're not based on your life, are they based on people you know in any way?
Not really. I mean, Morgan is an alcoholic. She's sober. And Charlie is in a relationship that she should not be in for a very long time. And, I've been married for 36 years, so that's not me.
And in Hollywood, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And Abby sort of followed in her mother's footsteps. And she had her own dreams that she kind of gave up. So no, they're not really based on anybody I know. As I went along, I started to develop more and more of each character and then went back and put more and more things in.
So when you first started to write, way back when you were on Hill Street Blues, how did you develop characters back then? Is it similar to the way you do it now? How do you make characters work? How do you develop them?
Well, back then I was writing TV. So all the characters existed. They were all actors. So I was writing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I wrote for Huffington Post, those were all essays, personal, funny essays about my family and my parents and my kids. So those were based on real people. So I really didn't start writing fiction until my first book. And that didn't even start out as a book. That started out, I was in like a writing group because I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to write. And I was in a group with just a writing coach and one other person. And she was just giving us prompts. And every time that I would write a prompt, it turned into this one character named Maggie. And as that happened, and I started describing things and writing prompts for her, I saw a story for her. And that book, that's my first book called After Happily Ever After. And that's really based on, my books have a lot to do with women's issues over time. So that book is about a 46-year-old whose kid is going off to college. She has one kid going off to college. Her husband's going through some stuff. And then she has the older parents who, her father, who she's very close to, starts to go downhill. And it's about her trying to rediscover herself in the second part of her life after she's given up everything for her family and trying to figure out, what do I do when everything is kind of collapsing on me? And so she starts making these decisions that could blow up her life that she wouldn't normally make, but she's under a lot of pressure.
But the character development itself came to you. You didn't sit down and draft out long prose versions of who this character was. It just kept coming to you.
Yeah, on that one, it did. On my other books, I did like a backstory.
You did do backstories.
Even if I didn't use everything, I did a backstory just to kind of develop who these characters would be and how their decisions they would make and things about their backstory.
Personally, I have a very hard time doing anything where I haven't sat down and kind of worked it out in advance. And I've talked to many authors on this show who are what they call pantsers. They do it by the seat of their pants. I'm not good at it. The seat of the pants is developing the development, not the actual script or the book, whatever it is that you're working on. So I think most teleplays, most screenplays for sure, have a single protagonist that the audience can follow. You've written a book here that have 4, I guess you'd call them protagonists. Do you think one of them stands out among the others as the protagonist of the story, or do you think that they're equal?
I think to some degree they're equal, but each chapter is from one of their points of view. And I think Morgan, for some reason, maybe because she's the oldest, comes out the strongest to me. But my first book was from the one point of view. My second book was from 2 points of view. And my third book was from 4 points of view, so to speak.
And the next one will be 12.
I hope not. No, the next one's actually from one point of view.
Well, it's interesting because, as you were saying, Morgan, I had already written my notes here that Morgan is the one who has the biggest arc. She's the one that has the most change from beginning to end. So if I were teaching about this book, I would suggest that Morgan is the protagonist because she's the one that goes through that big arc.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I just wrote a small, very short kind of prequel to the book. Mm-hmm. And Morgan, it's from Morgan's point of view, the whole.
There you go. So that becomes, as you're writing, that becomes your bias, even if it's unconscious or subconscious, I should say.
Exactly.
Do you think that the fact that you deal with various things, substance abuse, alcoholism, psychotherapy, motherhood, difficulty with parenting, changes in that kind of way to be, and certainly what it means to be a sibling, those are all sort of underlying themes that you have going on. Did you have to do any research on any of that, or did you already know about those things?
The research I did was for the Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a friend who is in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that whole stuff I sent to her and said, is this accurate? Because I want to make sure that it is. And she read all of that and she told me how it works. And because I've never been to a meeting. So my research was to go to her and have her read it and then talk me through it, that part of it. But as far as like siblings, I have siblings. As far as like motherhood, I'm a mom. So all that stuff. And then as far as the like suicide, because it's just only at the beginning and it's not about suicide.
Right.
didn't really do any research for that.
And you don't really deep dig into the suicide itself at all. It's a backstory of what happens. Do you find that when you're are you a researcher in general, or is this something that just happened in this book?
I do sometimes do a lot of research. My first book had some medical stuff in it, so I did a lot of research, and I was on a lot of Facebook groups with caregivers and things like that to get their point of view. So I did do a lot of research for my first book and some for my second book too. But my third book, I didn't really do that much.
So I found that though you have these 4 really different characters, that the book overall feels like you've written a memoir, even though it's not at all a memoir. It just has that feeling to it, which is the intimacy of it. And I assume that was not your intention.
No, I've never heard that. So thank you. That's great.
It felt that way to me all the way through. It was like 4 different little memoirs that you were getting, because they, as you say, you keep writing individual chapters coming from each individual point of view. And that certainly felt memoir-like to me. And so I didn't know if that was intentional or not. Obviously it was not. So,
it wasn't, but I like that. I purposely, though, did make sure that you got into everybody's backstory.
Oh, yes.
Each chapter, when you listen from their point of view, you're hearing what's going on with them. So in that sense, I see what you're saying.
Did you set out to have it have a comedic feel to it in many places? Was that your intent when you started to write?
It's always my intent. No matter what, all my books have they call them heartbreaking comedies, because there's some heartbreaking scenes in all the books, but I always have a lot of lightness and a lot of comedy, because I don't want somebody to read my books and then to be down.
Would you say that is your main tone when you're writing, is that you want to have a light tone to it?
Yes. I always want to have a light tone to it. I never write anything that's really, really down.
Is that because you just don't want it in your life as a writer?
I think it's because it's more fun for me. Like, not to be just like, because that's like, when you hear about actors that are in a part and they bring it home and it's so depressing. It's sort of the same thing. When you're writing, you're in with all these characters, and I don't want to be depressed. So. Obviously,
there are writers that write very deep, dark, depressing books, and I have a feeling that they are deep, dark, and depressed. But also the infamous story about the sad clown, the person that's writing comedy, playing comedy, and so on. They're actually behind the scenes quite dark. You already alluded to having writers that you know who killed themselves. That says something about what's going on with that individual. In your case, you don't want it in your life as a writer, so you don't go there.
Exactly. Yeah, because a lot of comedy writers are known to be depressives.
Oh, sure.
And stand-ups and all the rest of it. I'm not, but I just don't want to have that in my life if I don't have to.
Well, and I think that shows in the writing. I mean, I think it would be very difficult for you to write the way that you write, with the tone that you write, if you, in fact, were not, a more positive, upbeat person. You write many scenes in this book that are quite vivid. Do you think that comes from your screen work, from being a screenwriter?
Yeah, I do. I think when I write anything, I kind of think, I don't write for actors. Like, I'm not writing the book and saying, oh, she could play this and she could play that. But I think of these people as real people. So I try to make it as vivid as possible so somebody can kind of in their own mind imagine whoever these people are.
And that's why I guess that's what I'm asking. Are you then using your skill sets as a screenwriter to make it vivid, even though, as we've already talked about, in a screenplay, you don't write all of that. You don't write every bit of it. Your writing is very visual. I can see it vividly when I'm reading it.
I took a lot of classes, and one of the things they said, and I do this in like a different draft usually, because when I'm writing, I don't really think about this that much. But they said, look at all the senses. So if somebody gets out of a car, is it hot out? Do they smell anything? So I'll go back, and in like my second draft of the book, I'll start over and I'll start looking at each scene and going, okay, what in this scene am I missing as far as like, whether it's their hand movements, or their expressions, if I'm missing something, or in what the world is like outside or inside. And I'll do that a lot of times. I'll keep adding that. So
I found that you have a wonderful catharsis at the end of this book. And I think that that's helpful. And I think great stories are cathartic in some way. And I think that's what I consider to be the storytelling drug. That's what brings readers and viewers back over and over again, is that notion of catharsis. Do you, as you're writing and finish a book, do you find it cathartic?
I do. As soon as I'm done with the book, if it gives me I have 2 books that have happy endings, and my first book has a hopeful ending, but it's not necessarily, you don't know what's going to happen. And I did that because my first book is very real to life. And I did not want to tie it up in this little bow. So everybody goes, oh, okay, of course I knew that was going to happen. So it's hopeful. And it was interesting because the reviews, people said most people were happy that I didn't tie it up. There were a few people at book clubs that were like, I wanted a happy ending. So I did go back and write an epilogue, but I only put it out if somebody asked me for it. Like, what happened in this book? Then I'll send them the epilogue.
The thing is that, we get to the catharsis of we know where they are in the world, and they can move on from there. Because for a while in the book, they're kind of trapped in the notion of we've got to figure this out. And they can get past that, which is a cathartic moment, at least was for me. Let's talk about how you actually developed the book itself. Where did you begin? Did you begin with characters, or did you begin with plot?
In this one, I kind of began with both. I started with knowing that there were going to be 3 sisters. I had an editor that I was working with because I had written the outline, but I wanted an editor to read the outline. So her and I kind of went back and forth about going through the basics of the outline. It changed a lot just because then I put in more and more of the mystery and came up with different things, the clues and things like that. But I would say I probably started with the 3 sisters and then sort of knew that I wanted to do that, and then knew the basic story idea, and then just started going through it to figure out, okay, well, where can I go from here?
You already knew about Mom before you started.
Yes. I knew she was going to be a single mom. I knew she was the one that was going to pass away. And I knew that the sisters were going to have to figure out why.
So you knew it was going to be an uncovering of one bit of their lives after another.
Yes. I just didn't know how I was going to uncover it.
You say that you're a reviser. Does that mean, are you a quick first drafter?
No. I mean, I'm not. My first book took me 4.5 years because I had no clue what I was doing. My second book took me about 9 months. And I think this book took me probably like 6, 7, or 8 months. But I write it through, and then I go back and I do it again. And then I go back and I keep checking it to make sure there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to say, or delete stuff that I think, I might have written twice, because I've done that before where I write, something in one section, and then like 3 sections later, I wrote the same exact kind of dialogue. So I have to get rid of it. It's funny, so I do it again.
Do you figure that out, or does it require somebody else telling you?
Usually I'll see it, but sometimes my husband will see it. Before I send it to the editor, he'll say, oh, wait a minute, you said this exact thing over here. So.
Well, that's what I think of as you get lost in the forest for the trees. You stop seeing certain things after a while when you're working on something for a really long time. The structure of the book with the various chapters for each individual character, was that something you decided on before you began to write?
Yes. First I was going to write from one point of view, but then I thought, no, I think it's better if we see everybody's point of view, because then you can get to know who everybody is. If you do just one point of view, that person pretty much, especially if you do it from first person, they have to be in every single scene because they have to see what's happening or overhear it. So I didn't want to do that because that's really hard. And I did that in my first book. But then in my first book, I went in, because there's 2 other characters that are really important in my first book. One is her husband and one is her father. So there are chapters from their point of view. So the reader can see what they're really going through, but most of it is from Maggie's point of view.
And that's easier in a way, because when you have a singular protagonist, you don't need to worry about whether you're capturing all these different things.
Exactly. And my next book that I just finished also is from singular point of view.
And how many drafts do you think you ultimately did on this book?
Probably 3.
3. Is that typical for you? Is 2 to 3 or 4 drafts?
Yeah, probably 3. And then I gave it that was after like the first 2, and then my husband looked at it, and then it went to a the editor. So maybe 4 total by the time I got the notes and then finished the notes.
So did you know as you were writing that this was going to work? Could you tell? Did it feel like it was working, or did it require other people giving you feedback first?
I always think my books don't work.
You and everybody else.
I always assume everybody's going to hate the book until I start getting feedback, and like the editors will say, no, this is really good, or they don't have a lot of notes. Then I'll be like, oh, maybe it's okay. But until the book is out there and I start getting reviews, I never really know.
Well, I think that's true for everyone. We don't really know. We do what we do because we want to do it. We feel like we have to get it out of our system one way or another, but we don't know whether other people are going to be attracted to it or find it interesting or fun or whatever until you get that feedback. I have a friend of mine who's no longer with us who used to say there's nothing like the unmistakable sledgehammer of the marketplace. And that's true when you put a movie out into the world or a TV series. It's either going to catch on or it's not. And the market is going to tell you everything. And that's really true for books as well. And you did work with an editor at various steps through this whole thing, yeah?
Yes. Oh, I had a professional editor at the very beginning just to kind of go over the outline. I wrote the outline and then I sent it to her and she kind of went over it with me to make sure it kind of worked.
So this is not a language editor. This editor in the beginning is not concerned about your
developmental editors.
Developmental editor, not a grammar editor, not spelling and that kind of thing. This is someone who's telling you your story is working or it doesn't work, your characters work or they don't work, and here's what their feelings about it are. Kind of like in the theater, like a dramaturg, but that's not what we would call it in novels.
Yes, I always use a developmental editor. I used her at the beginning, and then I had a different editor actually for the actual book, and she was also a developmental editor, but because my husband did all the grammar stuff.
Oh, yeah?
So he's very good at that. So he kind of fixed all of that, and then I sent it to her for developmental editing just to make sure the whole story worked and that she didn't find something that didn't work.
So I'm curious, you're the first person I'm going to ask this question of. I have found myself over time as, for lack of a better way to say it, AI or whatever's out there, as that has become more and more and more prominent in our various programs, our writing programs. Are you finding that if the computer is telling you that a sentence is not right, that you're using that to help guide you to what you want to revise it to be?
I'll look at it, but a lot of times with AI, it can correct your grammar, but like if you're writing dialogue, it doesn't know that you really want to place the emphasis on a certain word or anything else. So the only time I really look at it mostly is for like commas or semicolons, which I'm really bad at, that kind of thing. But I don't use it. It might suggest a word, and that every once in a while I'll be like, oh yeah, that is a better word. But I don't like rewrite with it. I just sort of use it just for that like basic stuff that I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of writers are starting to adopt that I think as we write, I don't know about you, but when I write, and I've been writing a long time, I still will write the structure of a sentence and not sure I got it right. And I think a lot of writers go through that. And so if there's some kind of, for lack of a better term, a program that says to you, this is your sentence structure is poor, I might at least let it humor me. But like you say, when you're writing dialogue, that's not going to be grammatical at all frequently.
No. And I mean, sometimes it'll put a comma after, let's say, so, but you might not want that comma there because you're trying to have it say, so blah, or whatever it is. And it will throw, like when one of the publishers I went to at the beginning, their person put in all these weird commas in all my dialogue. And I was like, that doesn't make sense because that's not what they're trying to say. And they're putting emphasis on the wrong part of the sentence. So I took them all out. Whatever she did, I got rid of.
Well, I've told many people many times, if you want to see how people actually talk, which is not true dialogue, just read a deposition. If you read a deposition, they're literally typing down exactly word for word with all the ums and ers and the stops and the starts that a person is saying while they're being deposed. It's almost impossible to read. It doesn't read well at all. So when you write dialogue, you have to have whatever you're putting into it, which is sort of a kind of poetic way that you're writing dialogue. It's an elevated way to write it. Most dialogue is, and yet it could be very street. It can be very ordinary, but it has a kind of a rhythm to it. And you have to put the rhythm in as the writer, right?
Exactly. And I also read all of it out loud. If you don't, for me, this is just for me, but I read it out loud because I can hear then, oh, no, you know what? There needs to be an extra word here, or that doesn't sound right. Or instead of you are, your, or whatever it is, I read it all out loud.
You started very, very young in life. You did a little acting. You've probably not been an actress for quite some time, right?
No, very, very long time ago.
Do you still use that when you're reading it out loud?
I do. I mean, I sort of act the parts, not to anybody. There's nobody in the room. But I do because that's how I can tell if the humor works or, with comedy, there's certain, kind of rules. So I want to make sure that is in there, that I didn't, the rule of 3 or whatever those rules are. And so, yeah, I do kind of act it out.
Do you actually think about that as you're writing about the comedy rules, the rules of 3 and other things?
Sometimes, yeah.
So you're very intentional about it.
Yeah. I know.
Do you ever write something and go back after a bit of time has passed and read it and you're surprised by what you wrote?
Oh, yeah. There are times I used to say that I would go to sleep and then some little elf would come out and write like a whole bunch of stuff. And I'd read it and go, I didn't write this. I don't remember writing this, because you're in the zone. And so you just have no idea. And sometimes you don't like it. And sometimes you're really excited and you're like impressed with yourself. Going, I wrote that.
Well, I've had more than a few experiences after many years of doing this where I'll go back and read something from 30 years ago and go, I wrote this? I don't remember writing it. I don't remember. It's like, how did I really? You've had that experience as well.
Oh, yeah, many times.
And when you say, I love the zone, I love getting in the zone, are you able to get in the zone pretty easily, or is it something that takes you time to do?
It's very easy if I'm in the middle of a book. The first chapter is not easy because that's just starting everything. But once I'm in it, it's very easy. I actually work in my main family room because I like to just be around people. I don't like to be like in a room by myself, but I can tune out anything happening. They can watch TV in the room. It makes no difference. I don't hear or I don't pay attention to anything else. Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing you don't, but could you go work in a coffee shop like many writers do?
Nope. I'd be so distracted listening to people. If it's people that I don't know, I'll just start overhearing their conversations. No, I wouldn't. I cannot do that.
But in your own home where you know pretty much who's going to say what, then you can zone it out.
And it doesn't matter what's on TV. It doesn't matter anything going on.
And you can drop into that zone pretty simply then.
Yeah, I can. If I'm, like I said, if I'm right in the middle of a book, I absolutely can.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk for a moment about some of the articles you've written for Huffington Post. Any other publications aside from the Huffington Post?
I mean, I've done things like Medium a long time ago. Maria Shriver used to have her own website and I used to do stuff for her, but mostly Huffington Post.
And what do you mostly focus on in your article writing?
I haven't written one lately, but when I was writing them, they would be, like I said before, like my kids going off to camp for the first time, my kid going off to college. I wrote a funny article on menopause. I wrote, I've written articles on nutrition when I was a nutritionist and how the scale would bully me. I would write all kinds of different things mostly about my life and my family, but other things too.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that you get most of your ideas for articles? Did they come from your life, or did you have to sit down and conjure them up?
No, they all came from my life. That's why I don't write them as much anymore because I'm so busy writing books. But they've all come from my life, pretty much.
Are there areas that you definitely avoided?
I think everybody in my family, I would never hurt anybody in my family. I wouldn't write anything that was hurtful, but they were all up for grabs. Everybody, anything funny somebody did was up for grabs.
Did you tick anybody off?
Nope.
No.
Or at least they didn't read it. So I don't think my kids have ever read the ones I wrote about them.
Oh, they've never read it?
I don't think so.
Have they read your books?
Yes. My oldest son has this thing about buying my books in a bookstore. So he always has to buy it. Even though I'm like, I'll give it to you, he always goes to a bookstore and buys them.
That's adorable. I've got to buy Mom's book because he's supporting you, yeah?
I guess. I was like, I'll give you the money. He's like, no. I need to buy it. I'm like, okay.
That's great. I mean, that must make you feel good.
It does. It makes me feel good. And my mother tells everybody in the entire world about my book. She goes on vacation. She takes my bookmarks. She gets people to buy my books. She goes on Amazon and shows them. I think she sold more of my books than anybody else.
Well, what good would your mom be if she didn't do that?
Exactly. She's 89 years old. So
wow, that's the best. By the way, that's the best publicity you can get anyway. Word of mouth is better than any kind of advertising. Word of mouth is it. So if you have somebody that's out there selling your book for you, that's really great. So when you're writing articles, do you structure them or outline them the way that you would do it with a novel, or do you come at it differently?
I come at it differently. I usually just like stream of consciousness, write the whole thing. And then I'll go back and I'll look at it and see, do I need to change this or that or move things around, that kind of thing. But I usually do those stream of consciousness because they're not that long either.
So how often when you get to the end of an article or get to the end of any of your books, did you realize I have to go back and change the whole beginning?
I've done it many times. This book that you just read, it actually started out originally with each sister. And I thought, and in the middle of the night, I started going, I need this to start with a bang. So I moved that scene, that's the first scene in the book, to the beginning. And so once I did that, I was like, oh, okay, that's much better. So yeah, I have done that before and gotten rid of a first chapter and started on the second chapter.
So you needed to get through it to have the epiphany about the way that it really needed to open.
Yes, because I couldn't see it until I realized. And I read a lot, so I know that you're supposed to open with something that just happens. So I knew that was going to be better than somebody just reading about each character when they don't, know what's going on and why it's going that way.
All right. So this is important for me because I have my own issues with notes, note giving, note taking. You clearly have gone through in your career, receiving many notes from people. My assumption is you've given notes to people, editors, or whether it's from your husband or whoever it is, you're going to get these notes, especially in TV. What is your technique for handling notes that you find challenging, and how do you make that helpful to you?
Are you saying if somebody gives me notes?
Yes. If somebody gives you notes and you think to yourself, this note doesn't make sense. I don't like this note. It's not really helping me, but I know I need to address it because I'm working for someone else. How do you address notes?
As an author, the editor hands you the notes and goes away. So you can just say, I'm going to ignore it. In television, you have to take the note because it's from somebody higher up than you. And usually they will tell you basically how to take the note. They don't just say, we don't like this, change it. They usually won't do that. At least I haven't experienced that. They'll usually say, this doesn't work. Can you blah, 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 whatever it is, can you just change this around, or can you, take the note differently, that you did this section. So I found that not to be that hard to take somebody's notes. The hardest part for me, and again, I had an executive producer above me, was when the network would give a note and they had no idea what they wanted. So then I had no idea what they wanted. So I would go to the exec producer and say, okay, they're saying this. And sometimes they would say, ignore the note. They would just say, oh, ignore it, it's a bad note. Sometimes they would say, okay, I think what they're trying to get you to do is this. So those were the hardest notes to take, was just when I had no idea what they wanted.
Did you find many notes helpful?
In books, yes. I found a lot of notes helpful, but sometimes I would be like, I got a note once that my books, 2 of them take place in Los Angeles. And one of the notes was, these people went to a bowling alley. And the note from the editor was, oh, nobody in Los Angeles would go to a bowling alley. It's too touristy. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, what?
I go to bowling alleys. I thought that was like a crazy note that she was giving me, that it was too touristy to do Los Angeles stuff. Because I go to museums, I do things all the time. So that note I just ignored.
And this was in the book, not in a screenplay.
It was in the book. In
a book. Obviously executives in Hollywood are notorious for giving notes that people do not know what they're talking about, or they just go, they didn't read this, so they don't understand what we're doing here. They're notorious for that. I always found it took a long time for me to understand how to do it, but I always found it helpful to just take the note and go off and think about it and not immediately reject it or get defensive about it.
Yes, exactly. I never rejected a note immediately. I would just go off and try to understand what they wanted before I would say no. But sometimes, like you said, a lot of people give you notes and they don't, either they read it too quickly and they're not seeing that that question is answered 5 pages later. They miss that. So you're like thinking, but that's answered. Like, what do you want? And also in network TV, sometimes they want you to hit people over the head because people are not really paying as much attention. So, which I hated. I hated all the pipe that you had to put in, and then it always ended up getting cut anyway.
Oh, tell the listeners what laying pipe is.
Oh, laying pipe means that, like, if somebody does something and it's gonna, like, that you basically have to keep telling them exactly what's going on. That's really what laying pipe is that you tell somebody this is what's happening, and then you tell them again, and you tell them again like they're stupid.
Well, and the term laying pipe, of course, is the one thing is it connected to the next thing is connected to the next thing, like you're laying pipe, and that's what you're talking about. And when you first sit down to work on a story and you're setting that story up, well, how did we get from here to there? You know, can we jump from here to there, or do we have to show how we get from here to there?
Well, that's the thing, especially in books. I mean, also in TV, but in books, you want to show, they say show, don't tell. So you want to maybe leave a breadcrumb about something that somebody goes, oh, and then they realize later, oh, that's what that meant, 5 pages ago, which I like to do. I don't like to hit people over the head. And when you read books, most people are paying attention. They're not on their phone, unless they're listening to it, I guess they could be on their phone.
As you said, you are dialogue driven when you're writing. You like to write dialogue. Do you find that makes it harder to show and not tell?
No, I don't. Because the only thing you have to do, and I had to learn this too, is you have to learn that when somebody's describing something or talking about something, how their body is or how their face is, or if they're frowning or they're happy. That's the stuff that's a little bit harder that I have to really think about. Like, what would I do? That's why I sometimes read it out loud, because then I know, like, oh, I would be like wrapping my face, or I would be like, rolling my eyes, or whatever those things are. And so those are the things that I really have to think about.
I'm curious, once you've got a book published and it's out in the world, have you ever gone back and thought to yourself, why did I write that?
Oh, yeah. Well, not why did I write it? It's more about,
could I fix it?
Oh, gosh, should I go back and re-edit it?
Which you really can't do, can you?
Well, you can, and then you could put it in as a second revision, I guess. But
that's true. I suppose that's true. Are all 3 of your books through a publishing house?
No, the first one is through a hybrid.
Okay.
The second one was through a small publisher who, it's a long story, but basically she stole all my money, didn't give me anything, and I had to take the book back and self-publish it because she just, all the money I made at the beginning for the first 5 months, which is the most money you make right away.
Right.
All my friends and family basically paid her, and she stole all the author's money. So she's shut down now, but that doesn't help. So I took that book back and self-published it, and I loved self-publishing. So I self-published my next book.
Mm-hmm. So When People Leave is self-published then?
And it's great because you get to control everything.
I understand. I've got 2 books out there that are self-published, so I get it. Unless you are a huge name, a Stephen King or something like that, self-publishing is a fine way to go today.
Yeah, and you make more money.
You do.
And nobody really even asks you if you're self-published, or they don't care, they don't know, they just want to read the book. And publishers honestly take money from you. And if you aren't famous, most of those people do not make much money off of those books that are through traditional unless they're famous. And I've actually even noticed, I've been reading people's bios at the end of their books, some people that are with like Simon & Schuster or Random House. And now a lot of those people actually work for that company. They're like vice presidents of those companies. And so their debut novels come out, crazy and do great and get on the New York Times list, but they work for that company. So, I mean, it kind of makes it so unfair for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, that's true. To me, there was a time not all that long ago where it was frowned on, but not anymore.
No, not at all anymore.
I just think it's, for a lot of authors, it is the way to go. And by the way, if you're self-published, that your book is not going to be on the remaindered table at any point. You can leave it out there for as long as you want to leave it out there. But a publishing house, if it's not selling, they're going to pull it out of their catalog.
They do. And, you can get it into your neighborhood bookstores. They always want local authors. So my books are in stores all over Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to get them somewhere else, but, most books are sold anyway online.
Well, very few books sell more than 4,000 or 5,000 copies in their whole life. And so if you're a self-publisher, you may as well take as much of that as you can.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I have to ask you, the old line is that dying is easy, but comedy is hard. I know it's almost impossible to define, but can you, from your perspective, comment on what you think makes comedy so difficult to do well?
I think it's either in you or it isn't in you for whatever reason. And like I said, I'm not like at a party, saying all these funny things. It's not who I am. But when I sit down, the words just come out of me in a more humorous way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really hard for some people because it's just not the way they think. There's also people out there that are so funny at parties, but if you handed them, a computer, they would not know how to write whatever they're saying down because they're just quick.
Well, you're obviously good at taking what's in your head and defining it in a structural way in a sentence or in several sentences in order to do a joke or to have a humorous line, however that is. But many people who are just naturally gifted at being funny don't know how to write it into a structured way.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's to your advantage, obviously, as a writer. Tell us a little bit about your nutrition business. How did that happen?
So my youngest was going to go off to kindergarten. I knew I was going to have a lot of time. I couldn't go back into the business. So I hired a life coach to just talk me through what I could do. And I was always interested in working out and health. And so I decided to go back to school and get a master's and open my own business. I trained with a celebrity nutritionist for a while. And then I started getting my own clients. So I started seeing my own clients and I left there. And I did it for 10 years, but towards the end of the 10 years is when I started writing for Huffington Post because I just missed the writing. And so I just started doing that. And then when I decided to write a book, I just thought, I'm just going to close my practice. I really just didn't want to do it anymore. I had lost the passion for it.
Do you think that doing the business required you to have great creativity?
Not in the same way, no. It was more meal plans and things like that. So no, it did not feel creative in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And working with people who you're giving meal plans to, they're not thrilled, even though they're coming to you and they're paying you. So that's not really fun either.
Because you're giving them food that they don't want to eat, right?
Exactly. And then they get mad at you when it doesn't work because they didn't do what you asked them to do. So it just became kind of frustrating for me.
Well, that's anybody that's thinking about changing their diet for whatever reason is probably unhappy with the way they look or something like that, right?
Yeah, usually. Some people came to me that were thin but just wanted to be healthier.
Healthier, yeah. Well, were you writing all along as you were doing it, or did you completely stop writing totally?
I completely stopped because I was busy until maybe 2 years before I stopped the business.
I see. And that got you back into it. I've been having just the most fascinating conversation with Leslie Rasmussen, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And Leslie, in all of your experiences in show business or in publishing books, can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
So I worked on Alf all those years ago. And when there was Alf, but there was also Ralph, and Ralph was rehearsal Alf, and Ralph was always drunk. So they would come in, we'd go down to stage to watch the show, and Ralph would always be falling off things and be saying things he shouldn't be saying. It was really funny and fun. That was,
you worked on that show with David Silverman and Steve Sestarsik, both good friends of mine. Steve I knew forever. Steve, unfortunately, is no longer with us. But David Silverman's been on this show, and he's going to be on it again in the not too distant future. So it's great that we have that connection for people that we've known from our past. All right. So last question for you today, Leslie. You've shared with us throughout this whole show a huge amount of really helpful information and advice. And I'm wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those who are starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit trying to get to that next level.
I have two little pieces of advice. One is, if you haven't started, don't just sit down and write a book. It's just not going to work. The best thing to do is take the smallest steps and write a little scene about something. You don't have to have the whole book. You don't have to even know what it's about. Just the way I did it. You just create a character and just write scenes with this character, whether it shows up in the book or not, because it will get your creativity going. And the second thing is, was given this advice, but I didn't really need it because I already knew how to write dialogue from TV. But I was told, go to Starbucks, sit in Starbucks and listen, because men and women talk very differently. Men are much quicker in whatever they say, and women can go on and on and on, as I'm doing. But if you listen to the way people talk, like you had said about the deposition, taking out the and all that stuff, just listen to how people talk to each other. Listen to two women, listen to a man and a woman, listen to two men, and you'll start to hear the way people talk.
So when I was in school, they actually assigned us to do what they called an eavesdropper. And they would say, go find a place that's busy, like a restaurant, like a Starbucks, like a park or something like that, where there are a lot of people, and turn your back to people so they don't see you, and write down the dialogue that you're hearing.
Ah, that's good too. I like that.
And so then you'd come in and you'd have 1 or 2 pages of dialogue that was literally what you were writing down as fast as you could. But you didn't want to do it where they were watching. You didn't want the people to watching you writing. You'd turn your back to them and just listen. So I think that's a very effective piece of advice. And I'm glad you said it, because for people that are starting out in the business who need to learn how to write dialogue that sounds like people talking, that is a great way to do it.
And if you're going to do TV, audio tape everything you like, every kind of show you like, and just listen to them.
The other thing that I have done in my past, I think that's absolutely accurate, is you need to listen to the way people are talking, especially in comedies, particularly in comedies. When I get on an airplane, if there's a movie, well, it's less likely today because most of the time the movies are in the back of the seats. But in the old days when the movies were up above, I used to never take the headphones. I used to watch the movie with no sound. I could see if I understood the story from the pictures.
Oh, that's interesting.
When you can't understand the story from the pictures, clearly that's a dialogue-driven story. And it's like, I don't know what's going on, but they're talking a lot. But if you can tell what's going on, that's pure cinema. So that's why I used to do that as an exemplar. Leslie Rasmussen, this has been absolutely a blast for me, and I can't thank you enough for being with me today on the show. And I especially thank you for your time, your energy, and for all this great wisdom that you've shared.
Oh, thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.